There's a huge global shift happening in 2027, and today I'm going to tell you all about it. Now, global cycles have been a part of our life in almost every ancient civilization. In Vedic tradition, we are currently in the Kali Yuga, which is one of the four major cycles that we go through. I'm someone who actually has the right angle cross of planning as my incarnation cross. The incarnation cross is pretty much the what I've incarnated here to be, the energy that I'm supposed to really go put out there in the world. And so people who have this as their incarnation cross, or even if you have the 3740 channel defined in your body graph, we are feeling this much sooner than everybody else's. So I feel like I have a really good background of understanding how this energy has gotten so negative and why it needs to change. And in fact, Ra said that he got the transmission for human design in the late 80s because the world needs to be prepared for this massive global shift that is happening. Now, in 1781, there was a transition that happened with humans where we went from seven-centered beings, which is where the original chakra system comes from, is seven chakras. But in 1781, when Uranus was discovered and projectors came into the world, we shifted from a seven-centered being to a nine-centered being. And so during that time, the last 200 odd years, we've been in this transitional period because one of the awareness centers that we gained, the emotional awareness center, has not reached its full potential. And so 2027 is when it will reach its full potential. And so during this time, we've been transitioning from an outer authority and learning how to rely on our inner authority, which is what human design is all about. It's about not letting the mind choose what you need to do. And up until from 1615 to 1781, the mind was amazing, right? I mean, the Industrial Revolution started in the 1700s. And so we needed the mind to kind of put us into this explorative mode to say, hey, what else is there? But the last 200 odd years have been kind of trying to get us to turn inward in preparation for the great mutation of 2027. So we've been in this transitional space for quite some time now. So without further ado, let's get into what Ra kind of talks about. And I'll give my own commentary throughout, but I'll leave most of my thoughts for the end of this video. So Ra talks about how in 1615 we moved into cross of planning. And since then, everything has been about institutions, right? And so much has changed. If you think about 1615 to today or 2027, we've had so many accomplishments in society. There have been so many advancements in technology, in how we live our lives. It's completely different than pre 1615. So these last 400 years have been extremely, extremely pivotal for society. And in the beginning, the cross of planning, which is all about community and bartering and helping others and saying, hey, I'll do this for you if you do this for me. I'll take care of you if you do this for me. And it's about creating communities and institutions like hospitals and companies that give you electricity and the police department, all these things that in essence were really meant to provide for us. And for a long time, they did. And we've seen, especially since 2020, but more so even before that, that these institutions have not been doing good for us for a really long time. And so while it was necessary and it reached its peak and it was really great and things were industrial revolution, things were going great. Wow, we're making so many advancements. And then there's been this downhill where it seems like nobody cares about us, right? The politicians are saying, oh, we're taking care of you. Oh, I got you. We're going to keep you safe. We're going to keep you healthy. And yet they're becoming millionaires and everyone else is poor, getting poorer. There are millions of starving children. There's wars everywhere. There's institutionalized science, which makes us not have to abide by what they say because we recognize that there is a profit model often behind it, or that they're coming from institutions with biases. Financial institutions are to ruin. The education system, being an institutionalized education system, was such an amazing thing. And it is no longer what it used to be 20, 30 years ago. And I think that's, as a millennial, one of the things that we struggle with so much is because our parents grew up with the education system that was really, really prosperous and really made sense. But the education system is about money now. It's not really about the, it's not really helping us get to where we need to go in this world. Because what it does oftentimes is it adds to the homogenization of society. So when we're moving towards 2027, and just if you practice human design, we know about that it's about differentiation. So once we get to the 2027, it's increasingly going to be about differentiation and doing things on your own and not relying on anybody else, right? So all of these things that make us into homogenized beings that allow us to have authority outside of ourselves are going to start crumbling. And like I said, it started kind of in 2020. I think that's really when we started seeing, and it takes, we talk about 7 year cycles and how it takes about 7 years to be conditioned. So it's interesting that 7 years before 2027, we got this pandemic, and it kind of pushed a lot of people into recognizing that a lot of these institutions are no longer fighting for us and they've got their own agendas. And so this has been really pivotal for humans to understand that they have to start moving away from that, right? The interesting thing is that even though we can sense it's falling apart, there's a background frequency of the cross of planning that has been kind of barely keeping it together. And when 2027 comes and we change into the cross of the sleeping phoenix, which is all about the individual, that background frequency is no longer going to be there. So when that frequency is no longer there, it's going to be a lot harder for these institutions to keep doing what they've been doing at a dysfunctional level. They're going to start destructing at a faster rate than they have been in the last 100 years or so. One of the other things that's going to be changing is our relationship to animals. Now, especially mammals. Now, Raw talks about some stuff that I'm not sure if I understand or that I agree with. So I'm just going to leave it there that relationships are changing, and I'll give kind of my own commentary and what I'm feeling intuitively is going to happen. Like I said, as someone who has this cross of planning, I deeply see the dysfunction in the communities and the corporations that have been built around how we treat animals. And so I do think that once it gets down to the individual, there can and will be some changes, and I'll talk about that a little bit. So I'm not going to go super into the mechanics in this video because I want to give you an overall picture, which is what I'm really good at doing. And there's a lot of information out there about the mechanics of the mutation that is happening. What I will say is that it's fulfilling the potential of our emotional center, so the solar plexus. So I'm an emotional authority, and one thing that I talk about all the time, and I've talked about in my emotional authority videos, is that emotional authority is the newest awareness center, right? So we've got the spleen, which is the oldest awareness center. It's that instinctive, fear-based intuition that animals have, so that when we have it too. So it's that knowing that something is wrong and we need to make an action in the moment. And then we have the ajna, which is the second one. And animals don't have that one, but this is where we humans got the ability to conceptualize things. And then the third and newest one is emotions. And this is not fulfilled its full potential, and it's not integrated at all into society. And the center itself just isn't made fully aware yet. So we go through these emotional waves, and in 2027, people born with an emotional center will no longer have that emotional wave. And I'm excited to see how that kind of plays out. And until we get there, we won't really know. But as somebody who has an emotional authority and knows how difficult it is to live with this emotional wave, I'm just really excited. I mean, I say difficult, but it's not difficult, it's just different. We're really here to teach other people about our emotional depth, and most of society is not used to that. So we really have to really focus on teaching them how to respect it. And that starts by us respecting ourselves first. So now I'll talk about kind of my thoughts on this, my intuitive thoughts, and how I've been feeling the last several years. So I believe that the pandemic was really done in order to push the majority of the world into understanding how dysfunctional things have gotten. And I want to say that the majority by this time, 2024, that even people who didn't believe this maybe in 2021 or 2022 are starting to see how they really weren't trying to protect our best interests. And this has been like the last and final push by the loving universe to push the most amount of people into an increased state of self-awareness to prepare us for the cross of the sleeping phoenix, which is going to be all about being selfish, about the individual. Small business is going to prosper, entrepreneurship is going to prosper. And so this is kind of what the universe is pushing us towards. And this may come about in some difficult ways. We're hearing about a lot of people getting laid off right now, a lot of relationships ending. These are all necessary in order for us to be able to transform those themes as a collective. For example, the new way of being intimate is going to be freedom. it's no longer going to come from codependency in relationships. And we need to learn how to cultivate that freedom in our relationships. So pretty much what I'm saying is freedom in work and relationships is going to be huge. And this is why we've seen so many people, because of the pandemic, move towards working for themselves and working on the internet. Because this is going to be something that a lot of people are going to want to move towards, is autonomy. We often talk about freedom, and the thing is I don't think we necessarily want freedom to do nothing. I think we want autonomy in our work. And I think this is where we're going to be headed in these times. And so if you're feeling the push to change something in your career or your relationship, it's happening by design. And I also want to say that if you're not feeling the push, but you're just sitting in that space of stillness, which I have another video, I'll link that below, where I kind of talk about how nothing is resonating for a lot of people right now. And this is because we're in this void before 2027 happens. And this is a process that needs to happen. We need to sit with what is no longer resonating. But what I always say is that, can you trust that this is actually happening for a reason? Because I deeply, deeply know that it is. And anytime I'm going through something like this, I got laid off last year. And I remember within 5 seconds, I felt this deep knowing that this was for my greatest good. And I have a understanding that this is really what's happening, is that anyone who's losing jobs, losing relationships, going through these big metamorphoses in life, it's because you need to be prepared for something. And like I said, that's not in a fear-mongering way. It's like in an exciting way. Like it's like in a really uplifting way and really inspiring way, at least from my standpoint. I see life as an adventure, and that's the best thing that has ever happened to me, is when I decide to look at life as an adventure, then nothing bad really happens. It's just an adventure. But as we move closer and closer to 2027, we're going to see how necessary it is to really foster that sense of security and authority from the inside out. One of the things that I mentioned was that our relationship to animals is going to change. And I believe that we are going to have a lot more people going towards vegetarian. We're going to have a lot of people going towards becoming vegetarians or vegans. There's going to be changes in at least the factory farming that's happening, because they are just absolutely horrific. So if you're feeling like this video is giving you any sort of value, I want you to journal on these questions. And you can do this in the comments below, so we can all share our experiences with each other, which I find really, really fulfilling, especially in times like this, because this is kind of like there's an openness about this 2027, right? We have certain information, but we're not really sure exactly how it's going to turn out. And so I find that hearing other people's opinions has been really, really helpful to see what I resonate with, what I don't resonate with. So number one, have you felt a pull to do something that you actually really want to do and not just what you're told to do by society? And how so? Number two, have you started implementing more boundaries in your life? Do you feel called to implement more boundaries in your life? Have you been saying no more? If not, do you feel called to do this? And if you have, how has that shifted for you? How has that shifted your energy, your relationships, your work? And three, what do you find in your life that you're no longer resonating with? Get really specific with this question, because you're going to see what kind of themes come up. And it may not be that you're getting rid of certain people or jobs, but certain themes in those relationships, certain themes in those jobs, certain themes in your life at large. I also want to reassure you once again that none of this is happening on accident. This is all happening by design. There's no such thing as a coincidence. And I want you to find hope and inspiration, and also from that hope and inspiration, take responsibility of your own life, because as 2027 comes around, it's going to be a lot harder for us to feel held together by the background frequency if we haven't cultivated that level of self-awareness and what we're about and what our energy looks like and the boundaries around it. And if we're talking about human design, then also talking about using strategy and authority. If we haven't practiced with that, experimented with it, it's going to get a lot harder to do that. And nothing is impossible for sure. And it's still doable, but why not start today? Why not start implementing these tools and changing your life today, so that when 2027 comes, you feel more prepared? Let's cultivate a deeper sense of self, a better relationship with the self. Because at the end of the day, if none of this happens and everything goes haywire, okay, well, it's still always better to have a relationship with yourself, a sense of self awareness. I mean, that was one of the top things that helped me move past all of my autoimmune illnesses. Let me know if you have any questions or comments down below, and I will see you guys next time.